for taking the time again today for part 4, the final episode. I got to tell you, I was driving home on the highway yesterday, and I was listening to News Talk 1010. They were interviewing this guy, I don't know, he's in his late 70s, that apparently was an underworld boss here in Canada back in the 60s or 70s. And he was talking about his 5 years of probation that he received, right, for being in the, organized crime. And I don't know what crimes he committed because, of course, he didn't talk about it. But boy, did that pale in comparison, that interview, to the 29 years that you served for a nonviolent crime such as smuggling pot.
Well, I wasn't in organized crime, so I guess I got all of that time for a non-organized crime. I was about as unorganized as you can get.
That's great. So we left off talking about your, we didn't get into detail. I didn't think it's necessary to relive that 29 years. But now you are out. You've served your 29 years. And you've gone back to pitching, and because you needed some dough, so thank God for that skill, because all of a sudden you can go out and make yourself some decent money, But then you created the Silver Tour. Explain what the Silver Tour was, why you created it, and what it's all about.
All right. When I came out of prison after 30 years, and I had written a book. I went on the road with the book, doing book signings at big cannabis events. And I was at HempFest in Seattle. They get about 250,000 people for 3 days in this beautiful, long, slim park, 6 different stages, speakers from all over the world. It's a marvelous event. They've held it 22 years. I think there's never been a fight. Never been an incident there. It's really an amazing event. In any case, I'm up on the main stage, got about 6,000 people in front of me, and they're hearing smuggling stories and pitchman stories, and everybody's having a really good time. And it just hit me. I'm talking to people that are on my side already. I'm wasting my time. Somebody's got to go out and talk to everybody else. Now, amazingly, after 50, 60 years of marijuana prohibition, there wasn't a single organization anywhere in North America that actually went out and taught people the benefits and facts and the truth of cannabis. Somebody had to reach out. I mean, I'm a director of NORML, which is the oldest and strongest pro-marijuana lobby in the world, but we never went out to the people. We waited till people came and joined us, and then we taught them about marijuana.
Tell everyone what NORML stands for. What does NORML stand for?
National Organization for Marijuana Law Reform.
Okay.
It's been the leading organization throughout the world for many, many years. And I'm director of the state here in Florida, one of the directors. In any case, I knew somebody had to go out and change opinions. We weren't going to change the law until we could get the facts out there and teach people the truth about marijuana. And within a couple of weeks, I figured out what had to be done. At the time, Prop 19 was up for a vote in California. That was full legalization if it passed, and it didn't pass. I looked at the exit polls and saw that primarily it was seniors that voted it down. And it didn't miss by much, but it was seniors that made the difference. And it just became clear. I'm a senior, I'm a pitchman, and if anybody can go out and talk to them about marijuana, I can. After years as a smuggler and 30 years in prison and being in the middle of the marijuana movement for many, many years. So I decided to start something called Silver Tour. we'd go out to big senior communities, not rest homes, not assisted living centers. We go out to senior communities. In Florida, we call them over 55 communities. Where I live, they got about 3,500 people. Two big rec rooms where you can go in and put on a show. I've gone to the villages where they've got 70,000 people. I've done 4 shows there. Some of the big developments in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, I get 300 or 400 people at a show. And it's a show. It's not a seminar. It's not a talk. It's not a lecture. It's not a class. I bring a doctor to talk about it, to reassure them that there's no downside. Bring a patient, what they went through and how cannabis has helped them and how they've gotten off most of their pain meds, or use it to treat their cancers, or give it to mom to slow down the onset of Alzheimer's. And I've got videos from senior communities and senior hospitals with cannabis. Anyway, we put on this big show. We filled the seats by giving them a free meal from Panera Bread. Everybody loves their food. And a swag bag from our sponsor, True Leave, which is a dispensary. They get to see samples of all the products. And most people who come to these shows don't know there's any way to administer it besides smoking. Right. And most seniors don't want to start smoking again. So they learned about edibles, tinctures, oils, gummies, brownies, cookies. There's just endless ways to administer cannabis. And at the end of the show, we would send them over to see the doctor, get their medical card so they can walk into a dispensary and really change their life.
Yes.
That's what a Silver Tour show is. And I started it. I went out to all these big, in the beginning, not even one senior community would allow us to come in and put on a show.
Wow.
They all said, marijuana? No, our people aren't interested in marijuana. Don't forget, this is 2010, and there was still an awful lot of resistance.
Oh, these people remember reefer madness, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, they remember back in their college days when they'd smoke marijuana, order a pizza, sit around, talk to friends,
sure,
get a good night's sleep, or be able to sit down and study for hours.
Yes.
So it was really, in my mind, it was a matter of reintroducing it.
Right. It was
bringing out the truth, overcoming all the lies. When I look out into an audience and say, have you ever seen that commercial with the butterfly for people who can't sleep? They tell you, be careful, you could walk in your sleep and talk in your sleep, or try to drive a car in your sleep and put you to sleep. You know, more than half of all seniors are on Lunesta or what's the other stuff? They're the same thing. They put you in a fugue state. You don't really get rest. You don't get a REM sleep. And you remind them. You remember back when you were in college, you do a little marijuana, you have a nice night, and then you get a really great night's sleep. And for seniors, that's enough right there to make them go get their medical card.
Yes.
But after I've been doing shows for a couple of years, I was on parole. I had, I don't even know how many years, 7 years parole. And I had a real good parole officer. He said to me, Bobby, you know what you're doing, and I hope you succeed. Legalize marijuana. In college, he said, everybody I knew smoked in college. I've got 2 girls in college, and I'd much rather they smoke than get into the drinking parties and
absolutely.
Windows crash cars. And he said, I'd smoke now if they didn't test me and I'd lose my job. With two girls in college, I can't afford it. But he let me travel. He let me put on shows all over the country. And about 3 years in, he developed scoliosis. Surprisingly, cannabis may have helped him, but there was nothing. It was like mercy. There was nothing would knock out that infection. And he got sicker and sicker. I even offered to help him get some cannabis oil, some RSO. He said, I just got kids in college. And I'm like, anyway, he ended up in the hospital. And I had a new parole officer who said, cancel all your travel. He said, I'm going to show you how we handle a high profile parolee like you. You're going to have to piss in a bottle. I said, I took all my tests. I said, I haven't taken a test in years. My last parole officer said I was done with that. He said, no, you're going to take a test. I said, when do you want me to come in? He said, no, there's no need. I'm outside your door.
Wow.
And it was months of torture. He tried to get, at that time, I had just come back from Arizona from a conference of patients out of time. It was the first teaching organization for doctors and nurses. And there was a 3-day conference at a big Marriott resort. And they had brought in a chef that cooked everything with a little cannabis in it. So I had been eating cannabis, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes.
And I'm out there smoking with the doctors and the nurses. So I knew I'd be dirty. And I was. He recommended violating me and putting me back in jail.
Wow.
Fortunately, they didn't do it. And I fought him for another couple of years. He finally let me off parole based on
Wow.
good behavior. But during that time when I couldn't travel, I did what I know how to do best. I made an infomercial.
Yes.
Called Should Grandma Smoke Pot?
Yes.
You know, years ago I was making commercials before Ronnie Popeil, an old bit from the Atlantic City Boardwalk. We pioneered infomercials.
Yes.
I mean, the first ones ever made were Ruby Morris, Lester Morris, Archie Morris, and then Ronnie Popeil. I made the first Ginsu knife.
Yes. Yes.
But anyway, I took my 1 hour show and turned it into a half-hour infomercial. And I booked it on TV stations all over the country, in about 20 states. And it wasn't easy at first. The states didn't want to take shows about cannabis. But I persisted, and I managed to get it into, of all things, Hearst. Hearst owns a chain of TV stations and radio stations, and of course, newspapers. And anybody who knows their cannabis history knows that it was Hearst campaigned the hardest to get cannabis prohibited. Most people think it had to do with pharma. It didn't. It was the cotton and paper industry, and paper especially. Hearst supplied all the newsprint, you know, those giant rolls of paper that go to the newspapers. He supplied all the newsprint to virtually every paper in North America. And the papers had been rattling his cage about changing the paper to a paper made of hemp. And he set up an experimental farm, saw that he could grow more usable paper, hemp for paper, in a few months than a forest could grow an acre of forest in 10 years.
Wow.
And you could do it cheaper. You could process the paper without chemicals. You wouldn't pollute the rivers, because paper making is very dirty. And he, at that point, decided it would be suicidal to agree to make pen paper because he owned virtually millions of acres of fir trees, of what do you call the trees that they make paper from. And it all would have been a total loss.
Right.
And it was Hearst who actually ran the major campaigns and created Reefer Madness. Surprisingly, it was the Hearst TV stations, after vetting my show, Should Grandma Smoke Pot, the lawyers in New York watched it for days. And they said, Bobby, you can put this on any station we have. It's good information. I said, well, what about the section in there where I blame prohibition on Hearst? Because it's in the infomercial. And they said, no, it was true at the time and it's not true now.
Yeah.
So there's no problem. So now I had live shows. I had television shows. What you see behind me is a billboard that says, I'm a patient, not a criminal.
Yes.
We put those up in several states. And after we tried to get into senior communities to do live shows and were turned down, we started doing them in Reform synagogues. Reform branch of Judaism has always advocated for medical marijuana, but in probably 10, 15 years since it was on their platform, they never had anybody to do anything about it. They had no outreach. They didn't have people who were really educated about it. And so it never went anywhere. And after I called the Reformed headquarters in New York and said, I want to come in with a doctor and nurse and patients and put on shows, it wasn't an hour before my phone started ringing off the hook with doctors in South Florida. One synagogue after another calling me, said, let's do a show. And the first one I did was in Boca or Delray, and the Wall Street Journal was there.
Yes.
They interviewed people going in, what are you doing here? Interested in marijuana? And most of them said, no, I always come on Wednesday for the free food and the show, or my grandson said I should come, or my granddaughter said I should come. In any case, they were a little bit, I'm not sure why I'm here. But an hour later, when they were leaving, it was 3 people. Why can't I just go out and get medicine? I just listened to a doctor who told me how much good it would do and how much harm it couldn't possibly do. And I want to try it. And that was the attitude. And as an old pitchman, on like this, you've reached them. Yeah. Back when we were campaigning to legalize in Florida for medical marijuana, the second synagogue I was at was also in Delray, but huge, gorgeous, about 200 people in the audience. And now we kind of knew what we were doing. It was our second big show. And at the end of the show, I asked the audience, and I put up phone numbers up on a whiteboard behind me. I said, these are your state congressman and senator for your district. If you'd like to see marijuana legalized here in Florida, you must give them a call and let them know. This was a Sunday. Monday was a holiday. And, the further away you get from the show, the more it dissipates.
Yes. On
Tuesday, they made the calls. There were 200 people in the audience. And, the offices have to log in the calls so they know how many calls they got for what. And 197 people, one of those offices, 200, 199 called the other office. So we knew the Silver Tour was working. And at that point, we had been written up in the front page of the Wall Street Journal. We got a fabulous write-up from the New York Times. And the New York Times had a video up on their website showing part of the show. And so did Wall Street Journal. Now, I'm getting calls from senior communities. Oh, our people want to learn about marijuana. And it was just history from there.
Wow.
We booked one senior community after another. Now we had carte blanche at the senior communities. We had billboards all over Florida and several other states. We had the TV show Should Grandma Smoke Pot running. Well, we ran in Florida about 200 on a half a dozen stations, and in other states about the same. We were in 20 states overall. When pot couldn't break into TV,
Right.
I was the only one who could get on and tell the real story,
Yes.
tell the truth, and get it shown. It made a difference. One state after another started passing medical marijuana. If you walk into a dispensary in almost any state, you'll see that at least a half to 3/4 of the people are seniors, because that's what the Silver Door does.
How many
Now, to
states
talk
is
to
it legal
seniors,
in now?
the 19th state just legalized for recreational. Medical is legal in to one degree or another, and every state is different.
Okay.
I think in 25 or 20
It's amazing. Yes.
more than half the country.
Yes.
And this is all in the last few years.
Yes, it is.
It's unbelievable progress. Acceptance across the country has been tremendous.
Now,
You know, every senior's an ambassador
yes.
because they need something to. So when they go play cards or they go to any kind of an affair, or if they're still working, they go to work. They talk about show. They talk about cannabis. They talk about how they got off of their oxycodone
Yes.
and oxycontin, and how they got off the tranquilizers. They're anxious to tell one another.
Of course.
And that just created an explosion. All it took was somebody like me go out and talk to 40, 50,000 people,
Yes.
reach a couple million on
Do what you
TV.
do best, pitch.
It may be a small part of the population, but it created the explosion that spread all across the country.
Yes.
Of course, Canada even faster. And things are changing all over the world now. It's very gratifying.
Now, one of
I
the
get hundreds of
one of the
emails.
biggest dispensaries is True Leaf, right? In the States.
They are the biggest in the state of Florida, and now they've just opened in Massachusetts.
How many stores do they have?
Licenses in Connecticut. They've got 85 stores in Florida, and will have over 100 by the end of the year. They just bought a company called Harvest, which is maybe the third or fourth biggest. And now that'll give them distribution in Arizona, California, Colorado, the Western and Midwestern states. And then they just bought 2 dispensaries in West Virginia. Let me dump this call.
Sure.
Okay, all gone.
All gone. Robert, now did not True Leaf, in gratitude for the work that you've done, name a strain after you, the black tuna, right?
Yeah, and in my mind, it may be the only great thing to come out of the COVID epidemic. What happened was, when COVID hit over a year ago, had to stop doing live Silver Tour shows, putting back audiences into auditoriums. And so for the time being, we had to drop the Silver Tour. And the CEO of True Leaf, Kim Rivers, who's probably the most brilliant executive in the entire cannabis field, came to me and said, Bobby, we want to do a black tuna right now. I had mentioned it a couple of times. Said, why not take advantage of whatever celebrity I have? You know, the movie Square Grouper and a couple of books and whatever. And she said, we want to do it now. But you did so much for our company and for legalization. and for patients in Florida and in other states. We want to do something for you. And wow. So she said, what kind of a strain do you want? I explained that I wanted it to mimic the original strain that I was really famous for. I brought in most of the Santa Marta Gold from Colombia. And that actually became the mother strain for almost every good medical hybrid grown in the United States and Canada and everywhere else. It was such an amazing strain. And I said, I want to get as close to that as we can get until and unless we can find the original seed. And they bred a hybrid that was so good and worked so well for so many people that it instantly became their fastest selling strain. Wow. You know, you got to grow it before you can process it and get it in jars and send it to the lab. Every batch has to be lab. One of the great advantages of the legal system. But they were able to put out a batch, good sized batch, once a month. And it was gone in 2-3 hours. And after the first couple of times, people would watch for it, look for the email at night of what they were featuring. And by the time the store opened the next morning, almost all of it would be gone. I walked into my local store to get some because I got to buy it myself. I walked into my local store to get some, and I know they had gotten 150 cars. Wow. 2 a.m. when the deliveries come. And I asked if they had any. He said, well, I had a couple for you. But no, it's all been ordered for pickup or delivery. Wow. So it's an amazing, and they pay me a really nice royalty.
Yes.
Most of which actually goes into the silver tour.
Yes. Put
the silver tour back on the road, which is what we're going to do pretty soon.
Well, I look forward to that.
Now we got the seniors. They're out there working for us. But now I want to go and reach out to a much wider general public.
Yes.
I want to do it at the Big E.
Yes.
A huge outside tent like we used to have for the blenders.
Yes.
And cut my show down to like 20 minutes and turn that tip over. Bring them in, give them a cold water and a
brilliant idea.
Snack and,
yes.
And a swag bag. Of course, they're all nailers. Not going to be in their hands till the show's over.
Yes.
And that's my ambition for the Silver Tour now. I want to go to big auto shows, home shows, flower shows for sure, and do the big fairs. I'd really like to kick it off at the Big E.
Yeah,
Big E, I don't think it's possible.
Massachusetts. That would be a great show.
But that gives me all of New England, and truly is opening up all over New England. So I may be able to keep them as sponsors on these big shows out of town and pick up some donors. It's going to be expensive. I mean, to go into the Big E with that much real estate and rent a tent and chairs, and feed the tip.
Yeah.
It's going to cost 25, 30 grand easy.
But you know what? They came to the show, and I know you will give them a show. Robert, thank you so much for taking the time today for the end of this saga that you've endured. I look forward to everything that you've got coming up, and especially the shows. I'd love to see that, and I would come down to the Big E just to see that show. So thank you very much. People can go on blacktunadiaries.com.
Thank you for having me on. I hope we can have it, and I look forward to seeing you on the road.
Absolutely.
See you down the road, buddy.
Congratulations, Mazel Tov. We'll talk again.
Take care.
Take care, Robert.